Welcome. This is over the study of divide integer. So, how do you know that negative 2 times negative 4 is equal to 8, while negative 2 times 4 equals to negative 8? How do you know this? Well, let's use drawings, algebra tiles, or drawing. So, I'm going to, first of all, take out my highlighter. I'm going to highlight these negative signs. You may say, but why? These mean the opposite of. So it says, what is the opposite of two groups of negative 4? Here's our first group of negative 4. Here's our second group of negative 4. Opposite. So the opposite of it, turn it over, is 8. And that is true. Well, next one, what's the opposite of two groups of 4? Here's two groups of 4. Opposite be negative 8, opposite of two groups of 4. And that is why this is so. These are saying do the opposite of. Another way, some of you may have realized this, what's the opposite of a negative? Positive. What's the opposite of a positive? Negative. Some people may do it this way. A negative and a negative makes a positive, while if a negative and a positive makes a negative. Some people may do it that way. So you are going to be working with a partner and completing this matrix. You may have done this in elementary school and checking your multiplication facts. So it's the same premise. 4 groups of negative 4 is negative 16. 4 groups of negative 3 is negative 12. Because if I draw 4 groups of negative 3, I get negative 12. 4 groups of negative 2 is negative 8. 4 groups of negative 1 is negative 4. Next one. 3 groups of negative 4 is negative 12. 3 groups of negative 3 is negative 9. 3 groups of negative 2 is negative 6. 3 groups of negative 1 is 3 groups of negative 1. Yeah, negative 3. 2 groups of negative 4 is negative 8. 2 groups of negative 3 is negative 6. 2 groups of negative 2 is negative 4. 2 groups of negative 1 is negative 2. 1 group of negative 4, 1 group of negative 3, 1 group of negative 2, and 1 group of negative 1. That is so weird. All of them are negative. Let's go down here. 1 group of negative 1 is negative 1. 2 groups of negative 1 is negative 2. 3 groups of negative 1 is negative 3. 4 groups of negative 1 is negative 4. 1 group of negative 2 is negative 2. 2 groups of negative 2 is negative 4. 3 groups of negative 2, negative 6. 4 groups of negative 2 is negative 8. 1 group of negative 3 is negative 3. 2 groups of negative 3, that's negative 6. 3 groups of negative 3 is negative 9. 4 groups of negative 3 is negative 12. 1 group of negative 4 is negative 4. 2 groups of negative 4 is negative 8. 3 groups of negative 4 is negative 12. 4 groups of negative 4 is negative 16. So do you notice how if you have a positive with a negative, the answer is always going to be a negative? What if you have product of two positives? 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 groups of 4 is 16. 3 groups of 1 is 3. 3 groups of 2 is 6. 3 groups of 3 is 9. 3 groups of 4 is 12. 2 groups of 1 is 2. 2 groups of 2 is 4. 2 groups of 3 is 6. 2 groups of 4 is 8. 1 group of 1 is 1. 1 group of 2 is 2. 1 group of 3 is 3. 1 group of 4 is 4. So product of two positive integer is a positive integer. Now, what happens when you have two negative integers, such as this? So get my highlighter out. So it's saying, what's the opposite of one group of negative 4? Or another way of doing it is, what's the opposite of a negative? Positive is 4. Opposite of a negative, 3. Opposite of a negative, 2. Opposite, 1. What's opposite of 2 times, opposite of a negative is positive, 2 times 4 is 8. Opposite of a negative is positive, 2 times 3 is 6. Opposite of a negative is positive, that's a 4. 2 times 1 is 2. Opposite of a negative. Opposite of a negative is positive. 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 3 is 9. Opposite of a negative is positive 6. Opposite of a negative is 3. So this says negative 4 times negative 4. Opposite of a negative is positive 16. And this will be 12. Opposite 8. Opposite of negative is positive 4. So when you have two negative, it is going to be a positive. So when the signs, so what observation can you tell me? When the signs are both negative, and the answer will be positive because opposite of a negative is positive. If you have a negative and positive, what's the opposite of a positive? A negative. So when you have a negative and positive, when the signs are different, the answer will be negative. So simplify each expression. Which expressions are equivalent? You looking at your chart, or we don't need to use your chart. We can do it without chart. Highlight this, highlight this. Opposite, 2 times 4 is 8. Opposite, negative. Two groups of negative 4, negative 8. Two groups of negative 4 is negative 8. Opposite of negative is positive. 2 times 4 is 8. So these are equivalent. These are equivalent. Which multiplication expression above represents the model of this? I see negative 8, so it has to be one of these two. I see two groups, one group, two group. Each group has negative 4. So it's this one. 2 times negative 4. Two groups of negative 4, or 2 multiplication dot negative 4. Can you represent the model as a division expression? Does division follow the same rule of multiplication? So it started with how many negatives? 12 of them. It's divided into how many groups? Two groups. Wait, stop. Let's begin. I started with how many negatives? 8 negatives. It's divided into two equal groups. Each group has 4 negatives. Let's see, does division follow the same rule of multiplication? Well, if I look at this chart, negative 8 is here. That's 2 and a negative 4. Let's go back here. And 2 and negative 4 is, yes, it is. Because you learn in elementary school something called fact families. So if you have 15 and you're dividing it into 3 equals group, let's see how many would go in each group. It would be 5. What if you have 12 negatives and you want to divide them into 4 equal groups? Let's divide this into 4 groups. It would be negative 3. So can we use number lines and verbal and algebra tiles to help solve each one? You have 6. You're going to divide it into 2 equal groups, which is 3. Or you have 6 here. Can you divide this into 2 equal groups? Cut it in half there. So each one has 3. Next one. You have 12 negatives. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I need to divide it into 3 equal groups. 1 equal group, 1 equal group, 1 equal group. That'd be negative 4. Can I show it with my number line? I have 12 negatives. I need to divide these into 3 equal groups. Negative 4, negative 4, negative 4. All right, now, 12 divided by negative 3. So, do you remember the opposite of? Let me highlight this. What's 12 divided by 3? 12 divided by 3 is 4. Opposite is negative. What about this one? 6 divided by 2 is 3. Let's highlight this. What's the opposite of a negative? A positive. So the answer is 3. And next one. The Saints lost a total of 12 yards. That's negative 12. Loss means negative. On 4 plays. The team lost the same number of yards on each play. How many yards did the Saints lose on each play? So what's 12 divided by 4 is 3. So 12 negatives divided into 4 groups would be negative 3. Here's 12 negatives. How can I divide this into 4 equal groups? I divide them into groups of negative 3, and that's the reason why it's negative 3. So they lost 3 yards on each play, or negative 3. And our last thing we're going to talk about is something called 6 divided by 0. Is that possible? Can you divide these 6 into 0 groups? Is that even possible? Can you divide 6 into 0 groups? No, if you put no, I don't think it's possible. Well, let's show you why. If you own an iPhone, all iPhones have this feature. So let me play this. What is 0 divided by 0?
Imagine that you have 0 cookies and you split them evenly among 0 friends. How many cookies does each person get? See, it doesn't make sense. And Cookie Monster is sad that there are no cookies, and you are sad that you have no friends.
So you cannot divide anything by 0. That is called undefined. It's it's not there's no defined or definitive answer. It's not defined with the answer. That's why it's called undefined. So for example, if say 7 divided by 0, can you divide 7 cookies among 0 friends? Doesn't make sense. You have no friends to get the cookie to. And that is how you divide integers. So dividing integers, if you understand this, it's multiplying dividing comes from the fact families. If you have a negative and a positive, and a negative and negative, what's the opposite of a positive? Negative. What's the opposite of a negative? Positive. So when the signs, when you have a negative and positive, it will be negative. When you have 2 negatives, the answer will be positive.